I'll tell you what, when you first invited me, I thought, what do I have to do on a wellness podcast? But the more I've thought about it, the more I realized, no, this is integral to wellness. Creativity should be measured along with all the other, our physical health, our mental health, our emotional well-being. Creativity is fundamentally about having a sense of agency and the belief that one can affect the world in a positive way.
Jeremy Utley is one of the world's leading experts in innovation, and for over the last 12 years, he's served as the director of education at Stanford's renowned Hasso Plattner Institute of Design, aka the D School, where his courses were experienced by nearly 1 million students of innovation worldwide. He advises corporate leaders on how to embed the methods and mindsets of design thinking into their organization and works with professionals to cultivate a robust personal creative practice. As the co-host of Stanford's Masters of Creativity, he shines the spotlight on exemplars and creative practice across disciplinary boundaries. On top of blogging and podcasting, he's also the general partner at Freespin Capital and the co-author of Idea Flow, which offers a proven strategy for coming up with great ideas by yourself and with your team. I loved his book, Idea Flow, and feel like creativity is wellness, and you're going to learn why in today's episode. All right, Jeremy, welcome back to the show, round 2, my first and only audio failure. And the first one was so good last year, but you are such a doll and willing to come back on. What an embarrassment for me, but what a benefit for me, really, because I'm getting your knowledge twice.
Totally. You get 2 for 1. I mean, come on. That's incredible. You're welcome. That's great.
You are the master of ideas, and you wrote the book Idea Flow, the only business metric that matters. You host a class at the D School at Stanford. You are the man who knows everything about creativity and ideas. So we're going to pick your brain all about that today.
No, what I would just say from the start is I'm just a front row student in the classroom. I'm not the expert, or if I'm an expert, it's only because I'm sitting close, taking lots of notes. And I feel incredibly fortunate and privileged to have been given this seat in this classroom. And I want to make the most of it. So everything I share today that we talk about, I share as a fellow learner and student, not as like a professor from on high, but I'm subject to all of the cognitive biases, all of the same slips and mistakes as everybody else. But part of my own journey is just realizing, hey, I'm on this journey towards creative mastery with my students, with my audience, and being honest about where I'm at and where I'm learning. I mean, I had an experience today that I've literally never had before, and it's an amazing part of the process. So I'm happy to be a front row student with you in this classroom.
Well, then we have to know what you learned today. Like, what was the experience today? What happened? And then we'll jump into the one-on-one of like, what even is creativity?
Okay. Well, so there's a game that we like to play at Stanford. It's an improv game. It's really fun. It's called Oh Good. Okay. And we can play it together right now just because it's hysterical. But basically the rule is we give each other a gift, and the only rule in receiving the gift, you have to say, oh, good, and then say why it's the exact thing you want. Okay. Very simple. So I'll give you here. I've got these AirPods.
Yep.
So you have to say, oh, good.
Oh, good, Jeremy. These are exactly what I wanted because my husband, Chris, stole my AirPods to listen to ESPN while he does the dishes, and I can never find them.
Perfect. Do you have a gift for me? Would you like to give me anything?
Sure. Jeremy, I'd love to give you this 40-ounce Yeti.
Oh, good. I've been at doing a keynote today. My mouth is dry and I actually need a lot of water. So thank you so much. Okay. So you do the good one. That's usually pretty easy for folks, but then we introduce a twist. Okay. So for example, we give something that's bad, objectively not good. Okay. So you could say like, for example, Kelly, I've got these notes on a book I was reading. I just thought that I would give them to you. And you still have to say, oh, good, and say why it's exactly what you want. I won't put you on the spot. You don't have to do it.
No, I'll do it. Let's do it.
Right. Okay. So I have these notes.
Yeah. Oh, good. I've always wanted to know what you thought was most important about the things that you're learning in a presentation.
You're brilliant. Okay. So you're brilliant. So I'm doing this live in front of lots of executives at a Fortune 50 company live. And it's always a tightrope walk whenever you're doing it live. What had never happened to me before, usually somebody gives me like a napkin, in which case I say, oh, good, I need some kindling for a fire I'm going to light this weekend, Yeah. This woman, I kid you not, held up a spoon that had yogurt and granola on it. And she goes, "Hey, professor, I've got this used spoon that's still got some yogurt and granola on it." And so the point of this game, by the way, like what people realize as they do it is the gift that they get given doesn't matter nearly as much as their attitude towards it. And when you decide the way I'm going to respond is, oh, good, doesn't matter what it is, magic unfolds. You greet everything as possibility as a spark for your thinking. One of my favorite definitions of creativity, just to diverge for 1 second, a Hungarian philosopher named Arthur Koestler said creativity, this is my second favorite definition, by the way, you can put a pin in that, is the collision of apparently unrelated frames of reference. And so one of the ways to spark creativity is to intersect with that which is unexpected. Okay. And good stuff, like it's actually not hard to say why AirPods are good because like they're good, right? But to say why basically a piece of trash is a good thing required creativity on your part. And you demonstrated an amazing act of creativity in that moment. And people realize that upon reflection, what I say is there's no such thing as a bad idea.
Yeah.
Because the bad ideas actually yielded more creative solutions than the good AirPods do. So anyway, that's the realization I'm trying to get people to. I had a real life experience of it because this woman handed me this spoon and I'm in front of a lot of people and I'm like on stage. And my first thought was not, oh, good. It was, oh, crap, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
Like, what am I going to do with a piece of trash?
Yeah.
And my next thought was, oh, good. I put it in my mouth, pulled all the yogurt off of it, and I go, I've been needing to strengthen my immune system. And set it down.
Oh my God.
The place went ballistic. Okay. I mean, it was like you couldn't have scripted it. Literally, I could never have made that up in my entire life. Right. And it was like the perfect example of the principle that I was trying to demonstrate. If you welcome the unexpected with an oh good mentality, magic happens. Right. And if I hadn't been on stage, and if I hadn't known I'm trying to demonstrate the principle of you can treat everything as a gift, I probably would have failed. But because I was like, psychologically primed, truly, it's probably one of the funniest things that's ever happened live. The second, like the run-up is probably, I was giving a talk in Taiwan years ago to like 1,000 people, and I got them to do the wave in the stadium, which I thought was like truly hilarious to see all of these people. Like they've never done a wave, and I got them to do it, right? Yeah. So that was like probably second funniest. But when it dawned on me, you could eat it. It was like, I had to do it. And I didn't even have the line about my immune system until after I pulled it out of my mouth. And I'm like, now, why did I just put that in my mouth? It was amazing. So anyway, that's the experience I've never had before.
You definitely saved the day. And when you told me about the yogurt on the spoon, I had this one moment right seconds ago that I was like, do not tell me you put it in your mouth. And
it's terrible. It's terrible.
You know what's interesting is that we've had this conversation multiple times, not recording on failed audio. And again, before today's podcast, is just that creativity seems separate from wellness. Like I love all your stuff. Like I found it and selfishly, I'm like, how can I interview Jeremy on the podcast? The Be Well by Kelly podcast. But creativity, I mean, just even the oh good game that you play, right? To come up with ideas, like you're changing someone's mindset. And if they practice in that creative space of the oh good space, they're actually cultivating gratitude and they're finding reasons to find the silver lining and the goodness in their day and the yay of their day or their high of the day, or really you're changing a mindset to growth mindset, to open mindset where people can see possibility, and possibility is creativity. Like that, it's there's so much intersection there. So let's get back to the 101, because I really want people to get everything that they can from you. And already I'm sure they have, because they can just use the oh good line when something bad happens.
If people get nothing from this conversation other than treating the unexpected with an oh good attitude, you've got the price of admission right there, hopefully.
Exactly. Like I already have thought about 10 things in my head right now that I'm like, oh good. I'm so glad that the HOA denied my stained grade garage doors and they want me to paint them white. Maybe I'll run for the board.
Yeah. Well, that's what Clint Eastwood did, by the way. The city of Carmel would not allow him to build the house that he wanted. And so he ran for mayor and he changed the building code and he built the house he wanted.
There you go. Possibilities are endless. The unexpected was your second favorite creativity definition, but let's Can you for me define what is creativity with your favorite definition or your own?
Yeah, very simply, Steve Jobs said creativity is just connecting things, which I really like. And I like Steve Jobs in a lot of ways as an innovator and as an example. But my favorite definition comes from a seventh grader in Ohio, whose name, sadly, I don't know. She wrote a Post-it on a board in answer to her teacher's question, which said on the chalkboard, "What is creativity?" And her teacher liked her answer so much that she took a photo of it and sent it to me. And she knew that it would resonate with me because what this seventh grader said is creativity is doing more than the first thing you thought of. And that to me is a profound definition for a couple of reasons. One, it doesn't have regard to the arts. I think that a lot of people, when they think of creativity, they think of art. And while I value art highly, I love art, I practice art, my wife practices art, my children practice art. To equate the two or to synonymize them, I think does a lot of people a disservice because somebody got told that their rhinoceros drawing doesn't look like a rhinoceros when they're in third grade and they've thought the rest of their life they're not creative. And that to me is a real shame. I think creativity has as much bearing in finance as it does in the arts. I think it has as much bearing in philanthropy, in medicine. I want my doctors being inventive about the kinds of treatment they give and the kind of care they give, the kind of patient experience they're crafting. I want my contractor to be creative about the kinds of solutions he's dealing with my electrical wiring. I mean, hypothetically speaking, right? I want him to be creative, right? And so I like that definition because it doesn't make reference to the arts. The creativity is doing more than the first thing you think of. The other reason I really like it is because I'm a nerd and nerds have favorite cognitive biases. And one of my favorite cognitive biases, you've created a very safe place for me to admit that I'm a nerd, but is what's called the Einstilling effect. And the Einstilling effect is the human tendency to fixate on a plausible solution. And the way that works is the kind of the first idea that comes to mind that seems to work, you just go, that's it. And we go, problem solved. And the truth is there's very little evidence that suggests that the first idea is your best idea. In fact, there's a lot of evidence that suggests that it almost is never your best idea. I invoke the mantra, first idea, worst idea. I think that's a better mantra. But it speaks to this profound tendency. It turns out it's psychologically distressing to us to leave things unresolved. Right. And so all of our kind of psychological pressure is pushing us to just make a quick decision. There's a guy named Herbert Simon who won the Nobel Prize in 1954 for this idea of what he calls satisficing, which is it's good enough. And there are some areas of our life where good enough is great. But I think there are a lot of areas of our life where we don't realize that we're settling for good enough when if we would just be, as this seventh grader says, creative, i.e. do more than the first thing we thought of, we would find delightful possibilities aren't like years away, they're seconds away. And to me, the reason I like that definition so much is it just reminds me, let's just generate some options. Let's just generate a few more possibilities. And to me, it's not only, in my work with students and, I advise executives, CEOs and things like that, but it's also in my parenting. I mean, I do these activities with my wife as we're raising our kids because we find we arrive at better solutions by pushing ourselves to think beyond the obvious.
Right. And I think I would probably say that I suffice a lot. Like, I'm like, oh, got it, fixed it, moving on, like wanting to move on. But we all want to be better and we all want more ideas and we don't want our first idea to be our worst idea, but none of us really push past that. You're teaching your students, you're coaching your clients, you've written a book called Idea Flow, how do you get in the practice of creating more solutions? And can you give me an example of one of the times when maybe you didn't use that first worst idea and you came up with something super creative?
Okay. I mean, it happens all the time now, but I'll give one example just to highlight it. So we live in a house in the Bay Area that was built in 1908, I think. So 115 years old. And I have 4 daughters. Someone said recently, they have the energy of little boys, which I don't think they meant as a compliment. I don't know for sure. It felt like a backhanded kind of thing. But anyway, they're rambunctious, they're full of life, they're constantly running around and yelling and crying and slamming doors and, digging holes and whittling and whatever.
Being creative.
Being very creative, being exceptionally creative. I can tell you about my 11-year-old just started an amazing business. I can tell you about it if you want to know later. I am passionate about entrepreneurship. And I feel that entrepreneurship the tools and mindsets of entrepreneurship belong in the hands of everyone. And I actually told my this. Okay, sorry. Slide aside. My daughter's listening to this book for like the 10th time, like some sci-fi book. And I said to her, "Have you read my book?" She said, "Why would I read your book?" And I said, "My book will teach you how to make money." And she goes, "Really? Like how much money?" And I said, "I mean, if you read my book and try something, you'll make $50, guaranteed." She goes, "You promise?" And I said, "How about this? If you read my book and try some of the things that I recommend and you don't make $50, I'll pay you $50. And she goes, "Wait, you'll pay me $50 to read your book?" And I go, "Yes, I'll pay you $50 to read my book." She goes, and then her next question is great. "Do I have to read it before I try something?" And that's actually like, that's so huge. I mean, you as an entrepreneur can appreciate that. You know, I said, no, I mean, the guarantee doesn't apply. I'm like, but no, of course not. So she scrawled, I kid you not, I could probably find it if I looked on my phone. She got out a piece of paper. She wrote to our neighbor, "Dear Mr. Eric, I was sitting in our tree the other day and I noticed you have a lot of boxes in your backyard. I'm starting a box busting business. For 25 cents per box, I'll break them down. And for $1 per bundle, I'll put them at your curb. Please leave your answer on the porch of," and wrote our address on this letter. I kid you not. She walks to his house. She put an orange on top of the letter, like put it on his porch and put an orange on it. Within 5 minutes, I get a phone call from the next neighbor. He goes, "Hey, Jeremy, it's Mike." I was like, "Hey, Mike, what's up?" He goes, "Yeah, Eric's out of town and I'm checking his mail. And I just saw your daughter's letter." He said, "I asked Eric, I think he wants her to come by, but could she do our boxes too?" I kid you not, that kid has already made like $60 in the last 2 weeks and she hasn't even read the book.
Oh my gosh, I love her.
It's so, she's amazing. But anyway, so sorry, that was like a slight tangent on parenting, but I think we can be spurring entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial thinking in our, so I mean, what I didn't realize, by the way, is $50 is so much money to her. You know, she's like getting a $25 for raking the leaves or something, or sorry, 25 cents, not dollars, for raking the leaves, right? For her, the prospect of earning $50 was like, it's like she might as well have won the lottery, right? And so for me to say, yeah, if you try something, you definitely can, I think was, I didn't appreciate how much that would open her mind. So that was very cool. Anyway, back to the question of bringing these principles into my life, which that's another example, but it's different. So girls running around the house, slamming doors, da, da, da. Daddy's always very gentle. Guys, come on, we don't need to slam the doors. Well, one day, slam the door and this 115-year-old window in the door shatters. Okay. Glass all over the floor. And you go, what do we do? And what I said to my wife is, let's do an idea quota. And she, of course, rolled her eyes first. And then she said, okay, we sat down on the couch. And what is an idea quota? An idea quota is a practice, a daily practice where anytime you come up with against a problem where you need to find quote unquote the right answer, you know, this is a podcast, I know, but if you had video, it's like the right answer is an illusion. Like we aren't doing math. Okay. Most of the problems we face in our lives don't have one right answer. And yet window breaks, our instinct, the Einstein effect is let's come up with the right answer and let's implement, right? And I said to Michelle, knowing this, I said, trust me, I'm a professional. I'm a professional problem solver, which she rolled her eyes and then, you know, was very humbly compliant. And we generated 10 ideas instead of trying to come up with one answer. And our true experience, true life experience is the 10th answer was light years better than the first answer. Is light years better than the 7th answer, right? And by the way, maybe the 20th answer would have been better than the 10th, but the simple point is, if you're trying to come up with the solution, you approach the problem in a very particular way. If you shift your goal, instead of looking for quality, focus your goal on quantity, you end up opening yourself up to possibilities. And I mean, I've seen this, you know, I advise a Singaporean executive who lives in Ireland. She told me, this is so funny. She said, I do an idea quota every day. And Jeremy, you know, when the floodgates open, the floodgates open when I tell myself I'm allowed to think of something illegal. I just love that. You know, in Singapore, it's like, it's so like being like,
don't chew gum.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Or whatever. But for her, and I get it. Right. But what the point is, the quality of our ideas is a function of the quantity of our ideas. And importantly, it's a function of the variability of our thinking. And when we're very confined in our thinking, we tend to have like kind of interact in a very narrow band. And her removing the constraint of it's got to be legal increases the variability of her thinking, right? It doesn't surprise me. And that to me, that's really the secret is to put yourself in a posture where you say, instead of coming up with a good idea, I'm going to come up with lots of ideas. And I've seen it work in corporate boardrooms. I've seen it work in my kid's bedroom, right? But and there's a great there's a great experiment this guy, Jerry Utley, ran. He was a photography assistant to Ansel Adams. And he's a photography professor at the University of Florida now. And he did this fascinating experiment where he divided his classroom in half. He said, okay, into the quarter semester, we're in quarters at Stanford, but into the semester, I think at Florida, we're going to give grades and I'm going to bring in a jury of amazing photographers. But here's the thing, I'm going to divide you guys up differently. Half the class, you're going to be graded based on the quality of one photo you turn in. If you want to get an A, this jury of esteemed photographers has to think it's truly spectacular. Okay. If it's very good, you'll get a B. If it's decent, you'll get a C, etc. Then he said to the other half of the class, your grades are totally different. If you want to get an A, you have to turn in bare minimum of 100 photos. Okay. If you want to get it doesn't matter how bad they are, by the way. If you turn in 100 terrible photos, you'll get an A in the class. And these guys are going, man, that's not fair, right?
Yeah.
You know, if you want to get a B, you got to turn in at least 90, et cetera, et cetera. So fast forward to the end of the semester, he brings in this jury of distinguished photographers and he doesn't tell the photographers there's a difference in the groups.
Okay.
The photographers and Utley and the students were all astounded to find two things. One, in the quality kind of orientation of the group, they didn't award a single A. Right. Nobody whose job was to take one spectacular photo could do it. The other half of the class, who was told quality doesn't matter, all that matters is quantity. The jury didn't know that. The other half of the class was awarded a bunch of A's, lots of A's. Lots of students got A's. And the point being, I mean, photography is obviously a metaphor, right? We want to create great output in our parenting, in our business, if we're an entrepreneur, in my classroom as a teacher, whatever it is. Right. And we're naturally biased towards quality. And what the research is very clear on is actually quantity is the lever that we have control over. We actually don't have control over quality. And oftentimes we're poor judges of quality even. We do have control over quantity. And if we'll shift our orientation via even an idea quota, like I did when the window broke, we can be delighted by the flood of possibilities that challenge maybe the early assumptions about what a good solution is.
It's so interesting to me because there's so many things I want to talk about from this, because I look at the success I've had as an entrepreneur. It has a lot to do with my focus on quantity and practice, and like seeing, even just in my private practice with clients and nutrition, like seeing more clients made me feel like I was doing a better job and showing up better and being creative with like ways, whether that be like a tool for someone to not late night eat, or an idea of how they can get creative to have the chocolate they love in a different form that maybe doesn't have a blood sugar spike, or, you know, you just come up with, I was generating so many more solutions for clients, the more clients that I started seeing, and the less pressure I had to see less and make those sessions perfect. I think that focus on quality for that photography group put so much pressure on you. Is what is quality? What is good? Like, how is that even in a creative space? And to your point, you can be creative in finance. You can be creative in nutrition. You can be creative, you know, as a lawyer. And the more creative you are, the better you're showing up for everyone, including your family. So now we have to dive into like, what were the first ideas you had for your daughter, which I can imagine are, you're grounded and you're buying a new window.
No, I was afraid you were going to ask that. So the solution that won, this is actually the 10th idea, which was, I'm sure we considered illegal things like we have to make her move out or something. I don't know. But the 10th solution was she needed to prepare a lesson, like a presentation for her little sisters about why our household rules aren't arbitrary.
Oh my gosh.
Which was like so beautiful because she had to own it herself. She was responsible for communicating to her sisters. It was beautiful, right? And that's so different. I mean, the early ideas are like, let's take away our iPad for a week. Next idea is let's take away our iPad for 2 weeks. Guess what the third idea was? Should we take it away for 3 weeks? You know, it's like the tendency is just to be narrow. And then you get to like the fifth idea and you're like, gosh, well, what else could we do? I actually built a chat. I mean, to say built is I'm not a developer or anything, but through kind of just like a clever form, I basically created a chatbot that is like a conversation partner. And my wife and I, because you kind of get to the point, even knowing a lot of these tools, as I said at the beginning, right? I'm a student of this craft myself. And what you try, going back to Arthur Kessler's definition of creativity, it's a collision of apparently unrelated frames of reference. What I need in that moment, what the tool does, and a simple kind of rule for you is it's like, What are other places? What would other places do? So what's your favorite restaurant? Macaroni Grill. How would Macaroni Grill solve a broken window problem? Actually, I worked there and I know like we always clapped and celebrated. Okay, great. It doesn't, remember, is that a good idea? Doesn't enter into the equation. Who's your favorite athlete? Serena Williams. What would Serena Williams do? What's your favorite sitcom? Seinfeld. How would Seinfeld solve the problem? Right. But the point is, by entertaining different frames of reference, all of a sudden you open yourself up to creative possibilities. Like there's a Nobel Prize winner I read who said, what no person can do, no matter how great his or her imagination, is think of that which would never occur to them. I really like to quote, and I vehemently disagree with it. And I really like to quote. So, and I don't mind hypocrisy. I don't mind contradictions, all that stuff. And I love that quote because you go, yeah, it's impossible to think of that which won't occur to you. And yet what I found is using some of these techniques, I regularly think of that which would never occur to me. Mm-hmm. And there are ways for actually courting the muse and courting serendipity. And it's a function of input, being thoughtful about it. What are the inputs to my thinking? The inputs to my thinking are what determine the outputs of my thinking. Mm-hmm. Inspiration is an incredibly powerful word. I feel like it gets kind of demoted. We exist in these corporate hallways and there's like a poster that says teamwork and it's got people skydiving together. And it's like, that's inspiration. It's like, no, that's not what I mean.
Yeah.
My wife's a fashion designer. Okay. She designed for years for Janie and Jack, the kids' wear company. They'd go to Paris. Okay. She said to get inspiration. As a finance guy, I'm like, that's a boondoggle. You just want macarons.
Yeah.
You're not like getting
sign me up for that trip.
Right? I mean, she never took me.
Such cute clothes too.
Oh, they're amazing. She was like the shoe and accessory person. But anyway, so she'd come back and she's thoroughly inspired, and I realized inspiration is about the disciplined pursuit of unexpected input. If you recognize what I need is fresh input, you're 51% of the way there. And great innovators do this. Steve Jobs famously designing the first Mac, he didn't like the design. And he stormed out of the office. People think he's mad. He may have been mad, but what he did was he went to Macy's and he walked up and down the aisles of Macy's until he stumbled on a Cuisinart food processor and he bought it and he took it back to Apple's headquarters and he slammed it on the table. He said, it should look like this. And it's amazing because you can imagine computer designers going, it should look like a food processor. But we all know, right? We've seen the Mac. We go, oh, I kind of get that, right? But my point is simple. Steve Jobs, when he's frustrated and when he knows he's not getting what he wants, his instinct is to get up and go get inspiration. And for most of us who are solving problems, we tend to look down and think harder and, slam ourselves in the head rather than looking up and going, where can I go for inspiration? I taught a class with this hip hop artist, Lecrae, who's a Grammy award-winning, amazing hip hop artist. And he and I are giving an assignment to our students. There are a bunch of MBAs and lawyers and doctors and engineers and some undergrads who sneak in, things like that, because he's famous, Mm-hmm. And we're giving an assignment to go get inspiration. They're working on a project around kind of representation in filmmaking, which was very cool. And we gave them the assignment. They'd framed a problem, which is kind of a step of the design process. And then before kind of generating solutions, we encouraged them to go get inspiration. And I could see almost through like, a Snow White kind of mirror, kind of time travel, the blank look on their faces, like when Michelle told me she had to go to Paris to get inspired. I'm like, they're all looking at us like, what? I'm a Stanford MBA. I don't need to go into the world, And I said, Lecrae, how do you think about inspiration? And of course, as only a hip hop artist could do, he dropped a bar. He goes, inspiration's a discipline. And I realized in that moment, inspiration's not even on the radar of these students, let alone a routine in their lives, let a routine response to a problem. And to me, it's about rewiring some of those instincts. If I'm stuck, get up.
Yeah.
And I think some people feel it physiologically. They know it's like they start feeling antsy or something. But then because of the way they define productivity, I call it the tyranny of productivity, because of the way they define it, they channel all that energy into the keyboard and it's empty, wasted energy. Rather, like one of the techniques we talk about in the book, we tell students to take a wonder wander. You got a problem, you take it in mind, and you take a lap around the block, especially if you live in a city, it's great, but any area is fine. And you just entertain possibilities. The Amazon truck drives by and you go, what would Amazon do with this problem? You see a playground, you see kids swinging. Do swings have anything to do with this? Then you see like a nail salon. How would a manicurist solve it? And it's just, the point is you're seeking out unexpected input. And we don't value, because we want everything to be directly, linearly, perfectly, productively correlated. Mm-hmm. We eliminate all serendipity from our lives. And the truth is, creativity is a collision of that which we cannot expect. And yet we do very routine, expected things, and we don't see the paradox there.
I don't think people are even connecting what that fresh input and that better idea would correlate to in ROI. I think they're just stuck in the space of like, well, this idea creates this type of product, creates this type of return, and they're not using that wander. They're not looking for that fresh input. They don't see how it's connected. They don't value creativity, and they don't value inspiration because it doesn't have a dollar amount attached to it. But I mean, I love that creativity and inspiration is a discipline. And I think what you've done is shown that the science tells us that our better ideas come when we use something like an idea quota. You glossed over that. So I need to take you back. What is an idea quota? Like, people are going to want numbers. Like, how many ideas do I come with? How much time? How often am I using this? If I don't feel like I'm problem solving, how am I making it a discipline in my life to get creative? And maybe you touch on your NSDR break.
Oh my goodness. There's like 25 questions there. Okay.
Yeah, I tend to do that when all the ideas are everywhere and floating, but
yeah, it's great.
Idea quota, how do we use it? Like, what is it? And then if we aren't problem solving, how do we get disciplined about bringing inspiration into our life and getting creative?
Yeah. I mean, there are simple techniques. One of my favorites on the second piece is read outside your field. Yeah. I know a executive who runs an insurance company, and he subscribes to wallpaper. And he's like, I read it cover to cover because it has nothing to do with my job. And I love that. He's like, and I know that, he's like, I get ideas all the time. It's this seemingly unrelated thing, right? Richard Feynman, Nobel Prize winning physicist, when he was pursuing his PhD, he would spend semesters with other departments. He said he would like take field trips in other fields. And he did like a semester in biology, to the point that Dr. Watson at Harvard, who identified the double helix structure of DNA, invited Feynman to come and do a lecture in his biology class at Harvard. The guy's a physicist. He's not even a biologist, but he had this incredible wide-ranging curiosity of, visiting other fields and things like that. So to me, reading outside your discipline is a way to do it. I think that there's the tendency, if you know there's a problem, then the question is, using a tool like analogous exploration, we talk about in the book quite a bit. And if folks want to read it without having to get the book, which, as you probably know, like, whether people buy the book or not is irrelevant to me. The way the publishing industry is set up, it's like, who cares if anybody, it's like, find the material, use the material. What I care about is people liking it, right? So go to Fast Company. That whole chapter, or a lot of that chapter, is excerpted in Fast Company. I think it's called How We Helped a Silicon Valley something, I don't know. You look me up on Fast Company. But the point is, analogous exploration is like kind of a methodical approach to that. There are lots of ways to do it. On the idea quota, the definition of an idea quota is very simple. Instead of trying to come up with the answer, I'm going to generate lots of answers. That's it. Instead of the answer, where its definition is one, the default assumption is there is a right answer. I'm shifting my goal from quality to quantity. I think a helpful and simple heuristic is 10. Instead of 1, I'm going for 10. And it should be an obscenely tight time scale, like 3 minutes. Okay. By the way, you probably spend 3 minutes hemming and hawing over the one thing anyway. So it's not that it actually takes more time. It doesn't. I'm like, when Michelle and I sat down to do an idea quota when our window got broken, it didn't take any more time, because we're just like flustered. What do you do? Right. And we're like we're debating. Doing an idea quota is just a way to channel that energy in a productive manner. So it's not about more time. I mean, there's a student, a former, I ran exec ed for a long time at the D school. And one of the presidents of Geico, the insurance company, is one of my former students. I was in touch with her the other day. She's an amazing executive, Michelle Trindade. And she said, Jeremy, I still do an idea quota every day. I said, really? Someone like you? I mean, you're like a big shot. And I said, how do you have time for it? She goes, time? It doesn't take any time. She goes, I put my granddaughter's Curious George notebook in the passenger seat of my car. She goes, whenever I get in the car, I tell myself, before I roll out of the driveway, I got to write down 10 ideas to whatever problem is on my mind. She goes, Jeremy, by the time I leave the driveway, I've solved most of the world's problems. And it's that intentionality is the thing. It just requires the attention to recognize this is a muscle. And here's one thing that I would say. I don't think we talked about this in our last conversation. One of my favorite pieces of research is a doctor at Johns Hopkins named Dr. Charles Lim. And Dr. Lim was very curious. He's like a jazz musician on the side, and he's very curious about, this is your brain on drugs. This is your brain on flow. This is your brain on creative flow. That's what he wanted to know. And so what he did was he took an fMRI scanner and he put freestyle hip hop artists and jazz musicians in the scanner. And then he made scans when they were kind of reciting known lines of a song or reciting kind of memorized sheet music. And then whenever they departed, he would take a scan of their brain to see what was lit up when they're kind of reciting known material. Mm-hmm. And then he would take subsequent scans when he prompted them to flow. Mm-hmm. Now recite a bar like just off the top of your head. Now respond. I'm going to play 4 bars of, jazz sax. Now you play 4 bars in response of piano, right? That's improvisational. And his big question was, what part of the brain lights up when someone's in that state? And the amazing answer?
I want to know it.
Nothing. It's actually a part of the brain that turns off. And the part of the brain that turns off is the center of judgment and criticism. And I have chills because I'm a nerd and I'm into this stuff. But to me, it's a profound realization when we realize the majority of our lives we've been spending building a muscle of critical thinking, of judgment, of evaluation. The core question, most of the time, if somebody brings you an idea, your default reaction is what? What do I think of this?
Or what can I find wrong with it?
Yes, exactly. Whereas reducing censorship, reducing the filter, reducing judgment, I call it being sparkable. The shift is, what does this make me think of? What do I think of this? What does this make me think of? They're radically different dispositions. And like a bodybuilder, I actually used Gen AI to make a slide of this I used in my talk earlier today. We've got this like incredibly robust judgment side. And the side that shuts off judgment and allows for free expression and imagination and wonder and possibility. It's like the puny, like prepubescent kid who, you see him at the pool. It's like, I'm afraid his shorts are going to fall off. He's just like that rail thin, right? That's the other side. And so for me, what we need is we actually need deliberate practice, not judging, which brings us full circle, by the way, back to the oh good thing. As an exercise, oh good, what it's doing is it's forcing you to not judge, or it's actually forcing you to make a positive judgment in a way. But there's all sorts of ways that you can kind of trigger yourself to not judge if you're aware. And so going back to the idea quota, sorry to kind of, bounce around, but the idea quota is a mechanism to reinforce not judging. And whenever somebody's taking a long time, I say you're censoring yourself. The only reason it's taking a long time, I can give you 10 ideas in 10 seconds. It's not hard. You know why? I stopped thinking. And that's really weird for people because they expect the Stanford professor is going to tell us about thinking. And I go, no, your problem is actually, you need to not think. Yeah. You need to not judge. And that muscle is not nearly as developed. And so it feels unfamiliar, feels embarrassing. People stammer. If I give a simple assignment in a classroom, I say, write down a bad idea. It's actually phenomenally hard. People are just like, this is stupid. It's like, okay, why can't you do it?
Yeah.
Well, it's just, I don't want to waste any ink. Okay. So why can't you do it? Right. But it's so deeply ingrained. I've got to have a good idea.
Right.
And yet that's not how real creativity. I had Ed Catmull, the head of Pixar, on my podcast recently. He told me, he said, most people think of Pixar movies as amazing. Like, Finding Nemo, Up, Toy Story. It's like, there's like amazing. He said, what most people don't realize is our movies suck to begin with. And our job is to take them from suck to not suck. And I think that most people won't allow themselves to suck nearly enough. Right. And therefore they never get the kind of material that's worth refining and improving and making better and really changing the world.
It's a fear of judgment because they're internally judging. And so they're internally censoring and shutting down. It's a feeling of feeling safe, like want to feel safe to share our ideas, but it goes beyond that. It's like, I'm not allowing myself to feel safe, and I'm not even allowing myself to think outside the box because I'm worried about that judgment.
Yeah.
Acceptance. connection, community, all of it is related to this creativity. And I guess without this practice, we're never really willing to put ourselves out there.
One simple question that I ask people that I think is a great helpful diagnostic, because in certain communities you can say, "Am I safe? Am I safe, or am I creative safe?" Right? Here's a simple way to know whether you're safe. When's the last time someone shared a bad idea with you, a stupid idea?
Yeah, I mean, I don't ever really think they're stupid. That's the
That's
whole
good.
thing.
Okay, so that's good. So
Yeah,
you're a virtuoso. But I think any listener could say, "When's the last time someone shared a stupid idea with me?" And most people, there's only two answers to that question. One is people don't share stupid ideas with me, in which case I'd say that's great. You have work to do because you need to be the kind of person that someone can share stupid ideas with. But two, the other answer I get is, "Oh, all the time. People are always sharing stupid ideas with me." In which case I say, "You're a jerk."
yeah,
I was asking you whether you thought their ideas were stupid. I was asking you whether they thought their idea was stupid. And
yeah,
that's the thing. And your answer kind of alluded to the third thing. It's not a question whether you think we shouldn't be walking around going, "Dumb idea, dumb idea." That's not helpful. The answer to the question, "Am I safe?" is a function of how willing is someone else to put a very fragile idea out there to me in my presence. And if they've got to be perfect and buttoned up and everything's like totally, tight, I'm not safe.
mm-hmm.
But if they go, "Hey," it was one of my friends, a venture partner of mine in a different work context. Who's started multiple billion-dollar companies. One of the things he is prone to say on almost every conversation I have with him, he says, "Hey, in the spirit of sharing a stupid idea, dot, dot, dot."
Yeah,
And it's incredible to me the kind of cascading impact a statement like that has on our team. Because now I go, wow, if the smartest guy here is willing to share a stupid idea, really lowers the bar for me.
right. One of my good friends, her name is Alex, and she actually went to Stanford, and then she went to Harvard Law, and she's a very smart woman. And she,
Okay, sounds like it.
has done clerkships. And Alex, if you're listening, hey, you're really smart. But it's amazing to me because she is, works for Fox and has done all of these amazing things, and has, had a big law job, and now works for the studios. And she'll just be the person who's like, what'd be a really cool idea? Maybe when everyone was using like the nitrous oxide or whatever it is that freezes stuff, whatever that's called, to make ice cream, she's like, what if they did that with like cold pressed juice and you made popsicles for like kids? And I'm like,
Right.
that is a multi-million-dollar idea. Like, she'll just come up with stuff like this. And I'm like,
Right.
you realize you could capitalize on all of these amazing ideas that you have, but she's just constantly generating ideas. And I know that has to be part of why she's so successful in her corporate law job and her studio's job. I know that you don't think that there's ever a bad idea, but like, how do you start to suss out when something's like a really good idea? Because I think
Okay.
I'm the person who maybe would be like, the first idea was great. That's a great idea, Alex.
Maybe it is.
Put money out of that.
Maybe it is. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the short answer to your question, and entrepreneurs and folks who are kind of entrepreneurially inclined will really appreciate this, but there's no way to know a priori whether you have a good idea. The only way you know the quality of your idea is by taking action and scrappy experimentation. And the faster the action, the cheaper the action, the better. And fundamentally, I see a lot of folks do is they look first at kind of feasibility or viability. Is it technologically possible? Is it going to make me money, et cetera? And the most important variable actually the easiest one to eliminate is actually desirability. Mm-hmm. Somebody want this. It's not, can I do it? It's, should I do it? Mm-hmm. And so finding ways to kind of devise clever experiments, there's a lot of talk about big data right now. I'm a big fan of little data, mm-hmm. where you send an email to 10 people and see how many people respond. Wow, if nobody responds, probably wasn't that compelling of a subject line. Maybe they didn't even open it, right? Yeah. But thinking in terms of very simple kinds of behaviors that you can observe in order to see whether there's resource. I mean, I work with a restaurant company. I'll give you a practical example of this. I mean, it's a little bit different, but I'm sure folks will appreciate it. I work with a restaurant that's got this great idea. You ask, how do you know if you have a great idea? Here's my answer. Got a great idea. They want to do to-go desserts where people can bake them at home. Okay. And they've got like a famous dessert. Could we put it in a cooler in the lobby and have people buy it on their way out because they're full at dinner? They want to bake it at home. Great. Is it a good idea? Who knows? I asked the CEO the other day, hey, what's the status of the to-go dessert? he said, I think legal's reviewing it right now. And I said, why is legal reviewing it right now? He goes, well, it turns out we're not sure if we're legally allowed to sell, partially cooked food, that sort of thing. I go, what does that have to do with anything? Respectfully, what does that have to do with anything? He said, well, the ops team isn't sure whether we can put refrigerators in the lobby and to keep stuff cool. And legally, we want to know I'm like, well, what are we talking about here? You're asking, can we do that? Like, can we legally and logistically pull it off? The question you have to answer, I said, if this was a $10 billion new product, would legal figure it out? The answer is yes. Yeah, because the revenues are not that right now, right? If this was a $10 billion product, would ops figure? They might retrofit all their restaurants to become to-go dessert restaurants, right? It's like, if this were an enormous success, ops and legal would get things figured out, right? The question is, does anybody want a to-go dessert after a meal? That's the question.
Yeah.
How do you answer? So then the question is, how do we know if that's a good idea? Okay. How do we know if the dessert to go is a good idea? It's a function of the sub question, which is, does anybody want a dessert to go? Okay. Yeah. So now we know as a team, is it a good idea? It's a bad idea if nobody wants a dessert to go. It might be a good idea if people want a dessert to go. So now we say as a team, how do we learn whether people want a dessert to go? And you know what they did? They sent me, I could probably find the photo in my phone again. They sent me a photo. They put a refrigerator, it wasn't even plugged in.
Yeah.
In the front of the one restaurant. They put empty cartons, didn't even have product in them, inside the refrigerator that's unplugged. Mm-hmm. And then they put a sign describing the dessert offering. And you know what they told the host? Count how many people open the refrigerator.
Oh my gosh.
If no one opens it,
really expensive test there, huh?
If no one opens it, we don't need, and by the way, yeah, that's the thing. It's like, why learn expensively if you can learn cheaply? Mm-hmm. And their lawyers are very expensive, right? Why in the world would you bring a totally unproven, unvalidated idea to legal to review?
Yeah.
And what most people think, especially in the and I mention this because a lot of people are living in organizations and they live in this context where permission, we can't do anything until we have permission. My question is, why would I get permission to do something that nobody wants? For sure, I want to figure out whether somebody wants it. And if somebody really wants it, I'll figure out how to get permission. But permission is oftentimes the expensive thing. Mm-hmm. Dealing with ops charts of restaurant layouts, that's the expensive thing. Those are really smart people who are doing a really great job and their time is valuable. Why would I start there? Mm-hmm. Why not start with like an unplugged refrigerator in a restaurant lobby with a sign with a host who's like aware enough to just like put tally marks on a clipboard? And the answer to the question, is it a good idea, is a function of, do people want it? Mm-hmm. And the question for a designer or an entrepreneur or anybody who's trying to solve a problem is, what is the lowest cost, fastest way possible to learn whether a human being wants this?
Right.
And for my daughter, to go back to the story at the beginning, she put a letter on a neighbor's porch. That's it. And I didn't say, hey, I kid you not, Kelly, this is a true story. I have a family member who will remain nameless otherwise, who had a very interesting idea for some new business. And he asked for my advice because I'm the entrepreneurship professor. So he called me. You know what his big question was? I'm trying to figure out the logo for the business card. I'm like, dude, you do not need business cards. He's like, well, I want to be a, reputable appearing. I go, whoa, stop. He's like, he's paying designers to make InDesign files to have a business card for a product he has no idea whether there's any market demand.
Yeah.
But it's just like for people, so all that say, they're front loading a bunch of the expensive stuff rather than doing like the very, very cheap, scrappy, quick thing. Like he had an idea for people who basically, if they forget something at a hardware store, there's a way to get like a runner to bring them an extra part, an extra screwdriver or whatever, right? Yeah. Well, I can think of a few ways to see whether anybody would actually, what you need to figure out is whether when somebody gets home, if they'll text message you and ask you to pick it up. Do you know like a handful of contractors who might arrive at a job site without a piece or a tool they need? Yeah. Okay, great. Ask them to change your phone number in their phone to Uber for parts.
Yeah.
And then you just monitor your phone for the next 48 hours and see whether anybody texts Uber for parts, right?
Right.
But that's not sustainable. I don't care. The point's not, is it sustainable? The point is there any kind of a pull for the service that you're envisioning? If not, please stop making business cards.
Right. And the logo really isn't solving the problem of forgetting a tool
or
part for the job.
Totally.
I don't know what it is. I mean, being an entrepreneur myself, and because I bootstrapped my business, I had to do things a certain way financially.
Mm.
But I do feel like I have noticed when I'm mentoring other nutritionists who are starting their own private practice that doing the other things, like the business cards or the website or the logo or whatever, is a way for them to feel validated and not like they're an imposter in their own business. And also a distraction mechanism when they're fearful of doing the actual work or the actual practice of
Right.
the job they're trying to do. And so it is interesting to hear that he's like worried about his business cards. Cause at a certain point in my business, I was worried about what my website looked like. And, my Instagram, did it look professional or not? But what's interesting is fast forward to, coming out with my protein powder right 3 years ago, like around when I was pregnant with Toshin, my second. And the person who did my design for my bag was my wedding card designer, because when I got a few quotes from people about what it would cost me to do CPG design for my bag and all of the,
Insane.
fonts and colors and my brand book, it was like multiple thousands of dollars no matter where you went. And I was like, no, 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 no. Like, I just need you to put Be Well by Kelly vanilla protein on it.
Right.
And I'll stick the nutrition facts on the bag. But I think had I launched this without the experience of building a business and knowing no, the problem I'm trying to solve is that I want to drink a minimal ingredient protein powder where I know where it's coming from and I'm pregnant and I need it right now.
Mm.
And so we're going to see if we're going to see if people want this too by doing it as the bag part and the look and the design and everything as cheaply as possible, because one, I didn't have if I wanted to buy the actual thing that I wanted, which was the protein, I had to put my money there and not the design of the bag. I've since updated it, but I still am not at a place where my branding and marketing I'm going to go hire the most expensive firm, because that's not the problem I'm trying to solve.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I think having an awareness of what is the problem I'm trying to solve is actually, I was just in a session right now, at this big company, and they're going, we kind of fixate on that. And you go, is that actually the problem? Because that's actually a bunch of problems. What do you mean exactly? What do you mean specifically? And what I find is in a matter of minutes, we can drill down to a level of specificity where action is possible. And I think, I don't know, I don't mean this to, cast stones or anything like that, but I do believe because some of this kind of work is unfamiliar and uncomfortable, people are looking for reasons to not do it. And if it's nebulous and this is a global problem, how could we ever be so audacious as to think we could solve it? I guess we should have another meeting. And there's all sorts of reasons to not take action. But when you make it super pragmatic and you get to the point where you're like, no, we're talking about sending that email to these 100 people. Can we do that?
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, then you just have to deal with the fact that, oh, I'm kind of scared about sending an email to 100 people. So that's a legit thing. I don't mean to dismiss that. But sometimes we, especially in organizations, and I think even as solopreneurs too, it's scary to take scrappy action. Mm-hmm. So we can hide behind these very big, audacious, ambiguous things where it's hard to define what the right action is. Therefore, it's easy to justify inaction. Mm-hmm. And momentum is oxygen to a startup and to an entrepreneur, and you got to be moving. And there's no way to pivot if you aren't moving, right? It's like you can't steer a ship that's not moving. And a lot of times, like I told even the teams today, it's like they go, well, what if that's not the right question? I go, great. You'll learn that in a week when you deploy these experiments. Let the update of the question be a function of action you've taken, not a function of some other thought exercise that's informed by nothing. To me, one thing I find myself saying a lot is there's no reason to have a new conversation if there's not new information.
Right.
And the way entrepreneurs and designers and innovators create new information is through prototyping, through scrappy experiments that generate kind of small but really credible data sets that give them conviction about how to deploy the next set of resources.
Otherwise, they're just ruminating instead of doing something to actually test the marketplace and flex the muscle of I can do this. Because once you send that email, you're like, okay, well, now I can call a meeting with the 5 people that wrote me back and are serious about this idea, and I can present a presentation. And that still feels scary, but I have this experience where I sent the email and I got some positive reinforcement that I was on the right track. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I feel like people make something so much bigger than it needs to be when we really just, we had this conversation sadly on the podcast that didn't get aired. But I mean, when people come to me and they go, I want to write a book, I'm like, great. Here's how I started. I had one coffee with one girl who was an author of an interior design book, not even in my space. And I said, how did you get an agent? And she said, I emailed agents I didn't know. And I got names from people I didn't know. And I just put myself out there and I emailed 12 agents and I crickets from most of them, but I got 3 emails back. And then I booked a ticket to New York and I introduced myself and one was the fit. And then she's like, okay, now let's write a proposal. And we wrote a proposal. And then it's like if I said, wow, you need to write a book, that feels super overwhelming. That's way too big of a project. That's way too much time away from my family, or what will I say? Or what if I'm judged and how will I promote it? And what if I have to be on a TV show? Like Chris always says, I'm naive enough to take action. And I always want people to know that, like, if you just break it up to like exactly what you said, it's like that one email, that one coffee. And I'm not thinking, oof, how am I going to do that? I just think like, we'll just try it. Let's just see what happens, because I feed so much on that was helpful to me. Or I think that's, like I actually really use that every day. And like, there's so much possibility for like everyone listening. I'm like, go be an entrepreneur, go start a business, like go believe in yourself, go write one little email. Like that's literally all it takes.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And thinking in terms of, I think for some people, it's just what would have to be true? What would I need to have learned? What's the data? I was talking with this group here, they're trying to feed children healthy meals, and one of their challenges, they can't get kids to choose healthy meals. And I said, okay, well, what are the reasons why? And there's a hypothesis around variety. We don't have enough variety in the choices. There's a hypothesis around, this is my word, not theirs, around convenience. There's a hypothesis around timing. It's like, great, why don't we commission a simple variety experiment, a simple convenience experiment, and a simple timing experiment? Well, how do we do that? Okay, on one truck, you don't even have to have the inventory on board. Just make different variety, put different pictures and see if any kid orders them. Oh, sorry, we're out of that. Here, can you have this instead? No big deal, right? At a different one, change the location. At a different one, change the time. And then have somebody, again, like I love the image of a clipboard, because it's just like, it's no tech required. It's no systems required. It's just hold the clipboard and make tallies if somebody says they want it. And then you come back. And I said, the thing is, in 1 week, we could be coming back with a dramatically different conversation. Wow, we tried all these variety experiences and none of them did anything. We tried all of these different location experiments and none of them did anything. But we changed times to two different times, and look what happened. Well, let's redeploy resources to time or whatever it is, right? Or nothing happened. What are our other hypotheses?
Right.
But now, instead of, because next week, if we don't do anything, then we're talking about, well, what should the variety be, and what should the time be, and what should the community, like we can have these conversations infinitely wondering. And by the way, I'm the biggest fan of wondering in the world. So you can't find a bigger fan of the cognitive importance of wondering. But at some point, you've got to just actually take some kind of action that gives you information so that you can then make better decisions.
Well, you're coaching creativity by coming up with lots of ideas, but you're also putting boundaries on that creativity around action. And it's like inspiration is a discipline, and that like get inspired, but then take action, and get inspired again, and then take action. And then all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, whoa, I'm an author. I wasn't planning to do that. It was just a coffee date.
That's all. It was just, yeah. No, that's why we say idea flow. Flow is actually, I mean, as much as I'm the ideas guy, flow is the operative word. It's like to me, a good kind of metaphor for it is, the only difference that I know of between the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee, they're both fed by the same source. The Dead Sea is famously dead. The Sea of Galilee is one of the most biodiverse ecosystems on the planet. The only difference is the Dead Sea has no outlet. The Sea of Galilee has robust outlets, right? And the flow is essential to life. And when people hear me say you need 2,000 ideas to have a commercially viable innovation, that's staggering for people. And they go, I gotta have 2,000 ideas before I do anything. I say, no, I never said that. I didn't say create an idea dam. The only way you know what's good is by trying stuff and by iterating and by pivoting. It's the movement that matters. And that movement is, Actually, it can be ironically comfortable to people to stay in an idea generation space.
Mhm.
I'm just still waiting for the big idea. It's like you're never going to find the big idea unless you take action. And so to me, that flow is actually, it's a critical component of the whole equation. Think of stuff, try stuff out. Think of stuff, try stuff out. Think of stuff. And then you encounter more problems along the way. It's not like at any point you go, I have no more problems in need of innovative solutions, right? Because you know what happens when by the way, for listeners, I have no idea how Kelly's protein product is doing, or I know nothing about it, although my protein delivery didn't come to my house and now I need new protein. I'm sure, by the way, you had a number of experiments, protein worked out, then you kind of redeploy resources towards protein. It's not like, well, now that problem's solved. It's like, well, now there's the packaging problem. What do I suggest? Try some stuff out and see what works, right? And then you do that, and then there's a distribution problem. What do I suggest? Try some stuff out and see what works, right? It's like this continuous cycle, and you're refining sometimes, but the key behavior of an entrepreneur is crafting scrappy experiments. And when you realize that you're constantly crafting scrappy experiments, and that entrepreneurship actually requires really robust experimentation, then you need really quickly to realize how much I need more ideas. If I don't have ideas, I don't have any experiments.
Oh, you're making me excited to go create new products, actually.
Let's do it. Let's go.
What's next?
Charge. Take the mountain.
I will always be solving the problems of packaging, distribution, growth, and then needing more customer service support. And
Right.
you're like constantly, the pressure's changing of like, what is the problem actually? It's never solved.
Right.
But I guess if you kind of accept that the problem is never solved, then a problem doesn't stop you in your tracks and keep you fluster you. You're just like, all right, how do we get through this?
Right.
And idea quotas are the key.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Our bags are busting open in the Amazon boxes because they're being thrown around. Oh, good.
Oh, good.
Well, first we'll send you a free bag of protein, and then we'll figure out how to get better packaging.
If that's all I get out of the deal, it's a good deal. I could use it.
Let's talk about the NSDR break, what it is, 21 minutes, and why we need creative wellness in our life.
Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, just a small topic. So listeners are like, I didn't know I was signing up to watch all 7 of the Lord of the Rings movies. So let's see. So NSDR, non-sleep deep rest. And it's a protocol to stimulate a certain hormone and endorphin response that is supportive of creative ideation. And the key that I have found as I've practiced this, and to me, one of the big things is I never want to teach something that I'm unwilling to do. And if I'm unwilling to do it, then I got to stop teaching it. And one of the big challenges of one of the big, I would say existential, it's a joke, but existential crises in my life is when I learned that napping is actually really good for you. Because in my life, I hate napping. It's like I wake up, I don't know where I am. I'm like sweating. What time is it? It's like, it's the worst. But then I start reading about like Frank Lloyd Wright took 2 naps a day and he did all right. Thomas Edison had this amazing, he called it his thinking chair, where he would sit down in this recliner. He'd put ball bearings in his palms and he'd put pie pans underneath the armrests of his chair. And when he fell asleep, the ball bearings would roll out. They would clatter into the pie pans, and he had an assistant standing there to take dictation at whatever he said as he woke up. Right.
Oh my gosh.
Which is just like, it's like stranger than fiction, right? You can't make this stuff up. So I started reading and realizing, wow, there's something really valuable about napping, but I never had any kind of cognitive basis. And then I heard Andrew Huberman, my colleague at Stanford, talk about NSDR. And it basically is a way of kind of courting that hypnagogic liminal state between waking and sleep, where what's happening, the reason your dreams are so wild is because you're totally disinhibited. So ordinarily, in kind of orderly daily life, we're structured in our thinking and we don't make free associations. Well, in a dream state, it's not unlike Dr. Charles Lim's fMRI scan. Our judgment centers are deactivated. And so there's a free association. There's a reason why your 2nd grade librarian all of a sudden is at the skate park with you and your ex, like whatever, right? It's just and a dog is doing like tricks on the half pipe. It's like, because the reality has no bearing in our dreams, right? Well, when we're kind of in between, there are associations that get formed. There's replenishment that happens in our brains as well. And NSDR is kind of a simple way of saying you want to be as still as possible for about 20 minutes. what I do, my kind of heuristic is I set an alarm for 21 minutes because I know it takes me roughly a minute to get still. And I'm kind of fidgety. Maybe I have like an itch, like all of a sudden I feel like a dog's hair in my, ear or something. So I don't want to waste a minute of that. But I set a timer for 21 minutes. I put on white noise. And then my goal is don't move my hands. Okay. Or sorry, that's not my behavior is don't move my hands. My goal is to lose my hands. So I want to get to the point where over the course of, and usually it happens within like 7 or 8. So it's not that it necessarily, but I want to get to the point where I go, I don't know where my hands are. And that to me is there's something that happens there where I realize, and then usually that's followed by, I was just dreaming. And then that's followed by, and then wait, am I asleep yet? Wait, should I move? Don't move. Has my timer gone off? There's all of those thoughts. But I mean, I kid you not, Kelly, sometimes in these NSDR protocols, I will have thought I was asleep for a night almost. It is the craziest thing to basically be in this state where you're, and to me, the key of the whole thing is total stillness. It's actually not about falling asleep. And I feel like napping, sometimes you stress out whether you fall asleep. It's not about falling asleep. It's actually about eliminating stimuli to enable, you can think about connections, again, going back to this idea of creativity is connecting things. By the way, one definition you didn't ask me for, but that actually is kind of relevant right now is what's an idea? An idea, important, this is actually critical. We have a misconception about ideas. Ideas aren't new. Our brain cannot come up with new. We cannot make from scratch. Literally, we're incapable. What an idea is the sensation we get when two things we already know come together. That's an idea. So for example, baby strollers in San Francisco. Man, what a drag pushing those things up the hills, down the hills, right? And then I remember when I was a kid, I had a lawnmower business. And it was really hard until my dad bought me a self-propelled lawnmower.
Yeah.
You and every listener of this show just had a collective hallucination called an idea. Where two things, that strollers and self-propelled lawnmowers, came together in this weird merit. You existentially know there's hills in San Francisco. You existentially know about, but I brought them in close enough proximity that your brain just did the rest. And it's like, oh, that's an idea. And importantly, it's not from nothing. Okay, so sorry, I'm like kind of giving some background, teaching here to get to this point. When you deliberately choose to close off your senses, as important as senses are, as important as deliberately seeking unexpected input, there's a difference between collecting input and connecting input. And you have to collect and you have to connect. And not all connections are instantaneous. I mean, it's almost like, we say we conceive of an idea. And what does conception refer to? It refers to reproduction. And you can even, if you think about reproduction as a metaphor, there are times that not every connection results in a conception. Okay. Right. Just to kind of keep things PG. The same is true with idea generation. We're not having a baby every time we like go on a wonder wander, right? Yeah. It's not every trip to Macy's that Steve Jobs finds the Cuisinart food product. It's not like, oh, I know the magic formula, go to Macy's and I can solve my whatever. No, but the point is being in the habit of collecting unexpected information and then cultivating a habit of allowing oneself to entertain unexpected connections like NSDR does, where we shut off external sensory stimuli and we're basically left with our thoughts. I mean, there's a lot of there's one research paper I read, which was the creative benefits of looking at nothing. And it showed how creative output was enhanced when participants were told to stare at a blank wall. You're like, you can't make this stuff up, right? But all of a sudden, like synthesis is happening because I'm not receiving new input. I can actually connect and synthesize things in unexpected ways. That's what happens for me in NSDR. And it's not that I always bring a problem into a session. It's that I value what it does for my brain in terms of restoration and what it does for me chemically and endorphin wise. And that I value that there are sometimes, honestly, Kelly, I have to leave the session early because I have so many ideas that I have to write them down and I'm terrified I'm going to forget them. That's happened numerous times. And it's like, and I love, actually, I've learned to love like a session, but I have to remember the point isn't to enjoy. The point is actually that I'm courting the muse. Let me not let the muse fly away without capturing as well, right? And so it's messy. It's not totally neat. creativity isn't magic. It does feel magical, but it's more mundane and routine than most people know. Most people either have it on this spectrum of either it's mystical and therefore totally unlearnable, or it's rocket science and it's beyond my mere mortal capability. And I find between kind of mystical and rocket science, there's kind of just this routine, daily attention and habits that sometimes result in magical seeming outcomes and sometimes result in nothing. And if you become comfortable with that as a routine part of your life, the total volume of your ideas increases, the total volume of your possibilities increases. And every once in a while, you surprise yourself.
It's so interesting because when you see today's day and age and you see how much information is coming at us all the time, you could be on your phone, you could be on your computer, you could be watching TV, you could be interacting with people. There isn't that downtime. There isn't that mundane to just ideate or not think or just connect, to have those moments. And I know we talked about this last time, but it's like the best ideas come to me when I'm working out. And that's because I am not taking in other information and I'm moving my body enough to be in a meditative state to allow those connections to happen and to kind of like drop in.
But again, tyranny of the productivity. I mean, the reason we don't is because I got one more thing I got to do. I got to, and I mean, I gave this group, I'm with this group all morning. We're talking about all this stuff. And I gave them a very important assignment over lunch. Don't do anything. We've been considering a problem about how they interface with this global organization. They're kind of this foundation arm of this large organization. And I said, the best ideas come. I quoted Amos Tversky, who's Danny Kahneman's research partner. They won the Nobel. They basically reinvented economic theory. And, human beings were believed to be rational economic actors before these guys came in and said, actually, people aren't very rational. It's like incredible. Through a series of wildly inventive experiments, these guys rewrote economics. And someone asked Amos Tversky once, how'd you guys do it? How'd you think of these, like your experiments are wildly inventive? And here's what he said. The secret to doing good research, and I would submit to you, you could fill in almost any word for, we aren't all researchers, but whatever you are, the secret to doing good research is to always be a little underemployed. You waste years when you can't waste hours. And what I told this group, and there's a full circle moment here, I told the group, I'm advocating that you waste lunch. You all are going to want to go into side conversations. I want to invite you into a space where you just let your minds wander and see whether maybe better ideas will come to you. And I kid you not, Kelly, I walked back into that room after an hour at the end of lunch. Everyone's laptops were open. I asked, show of hands, if you actually use this time to waste time. 3 people's hands were raised. And I said, but you got some email done, right? Doesn't that feel good? And that's the tension we live in, right? I have a known return on doing email. Mm-hmm. I have a wholly unknown and unpredictable return on doing nothing.
Right.
Therefore, I'll, take off a few action items from my to-do list because I'm going to save myself 5 minutes later or whatever it is. And I feel that part of the reason that we make these trade-offs is we can't even fathom the benefits we are missing because we haven't experienced it.
You're giving people permission to rest.
Yeah. Permission to deviate.
Yeah. And that is, I mean, even just knowing what NSDR can give someone, what meditation can give someone, what that flow state in maybe surfing or skiing or whatever your sport is can give you, like there's so much wellness in that. And I know you advocate for that. And if anything, it just reminds me to like continue to have boundaries and block my calendar and have that time, because the ideas really do come when I'm not a rat in a wheel. And that's not the life I want to lead anyways. And
right.
So inspiring in that space. And I'm so glad that you've been willing to come on a wellness podcast to talk about it.
No, I love it. I mean, to me, I'll tell you what, when you first invited me, I thought, what do I have to do on a wellness podcast? And the more I thought of it, the more I thought, well, this is totally related. you know? And shame on me for not seeing it earlier. So you're the breakthrough thinker who actually saw the connection that I didn't see. You know, I'm in a business context most of the time. I'm with a bunch of graduate students, but the more I've thought about it, the more I realize, no, this is integral to wellness. Creativity should be measured along with all the other, you know, our physical health, our mental health, our emotional well-being. Creativity is fundamentally about having a sense of agency and the belief that one can affect the world in a positive way. And that is every bit as important as your BMI. You know, it's every bit as important as any other measure. I think we've done a great service to humanity in this whole kind of quantified self and so many continuous glucose tracking. Like you can track everything. I don't think creativity is on most people's radar. And I think that it's impossible to calculate the cost of that omission.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you were someone who was told that your art, your rhino was not a rhino, your giraffe was not a giraffe, and you shut down your creative thinking or you thought you didn't have possibilities, Jeremy's here to show you and tell you otherwise. And I'm so grateful that you decided to come back. Thank you, Jeremy, for all of your time and for inspiring people to get creative, to do a wonder wander, to use the idea quota, to get serious about coming up with more, because it's that muscle that when you practice, magic can happen.
You know, one last thing I would say, I'm afraid someone might go, but how do I get started? One simple thing you can do. This is like probably the most simple. Keep a bug list. Write down the stuff that bothers you. That's it. Okay. And you go, what? I don't want to be a complainer. No, I'm not saying complain or, you know, or moan about it, but it goes without saying, but I'll say it. That which goes without saying must be said. A problem is a necessary precondition to a solution. Many people who want to be breakthrough problem solvers need to actually become adept problem finders. And a simple way to find problems is just keep a list of stuff that bugs you. Write it down. You know, you said, I don't have a protein where I know whose ingredients come from. That was a problem in your life at some point. And what's amazing is people who are attentive to problems start courting solutions, right? And so if you take nothing else, even more than volume and, you know, creativity and all that stuff, just write down stuff that bugs you. And a lot of times you find that's where the ideas come from.
Inspiring people to go fix all my problems now. You guys find those bugs, find me solutions.
Yes.
I appreciate
Have it on my desk by Monday. No.
Yeah. I appreciate you so much, Jeremy. Where can people follow along? Where can they get your book? Where can they learn more?
LinkedIn is probably my, you know, most robust following there. I've got a newsletter. Folks, if they go to the website, they can get a free bonus chapter called How to Think Like Bezos in Jobs, which is pretty fun. It's a bunch of observations I've made studying those two breakthrough thinkers. And then I've got a podcast as well called Paint and Pipette, which is a reference to art and science of creativity. They're both. It's art and science, where I have folks like, whether it's Ed Catmull or Kevin Kelly, the founder of Wired, was on. I had Linda Hill, who's an HBS professor, amazing management guru, on earlier this week. Maybe I'll have Kelly LeVeque on at some point. That would be cool. That would be cool.
Happy entrepreneur right here.
Yes.
Maybe
exactly.
not. Maybe I haven't done as much as Jobs and Bezos, but you know, I'm here.
No, I mean, hey, that's all we can do. But anyway, so yeah, so you find me in that sort of stuff. And then folks, for sure, I mean, feel free to reach out. I mean, on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever, I'm fairly easy to find. I always say origin stories are my love language. So, you know, people say like touch, time. To me, it's like, if you tell me a story of how something got started, that's like the way to my heart. So anybody who reaches out with an origin story about some kind of innovation or solution, I'm like, I'll spend as much time with them as they want.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for sharing all of your knowledge. Always, it's so inspiring. So I'll put all the links to everything in the show notes. You guys go check out Jeremy online, follow the links, and go solve some problems.